Assalamualaikum to all. We are from class CFAP 126K Group 2. We present about our task, Federal and State Constitutional Relationship in Malaysia.
So, this is the members of Group 2.
First off, we have myself, Muhammad Nazrin bin Muhammad Zahri. Next, Ahmed Syami bin Zainal Abidin. Not only that, we have Dania Batisha binti Muhammad Yazri. And last but not least, Nur Shafamiza binti Muhammad Salim.
So to start with our introduction, Malaysia practices a federal system of government. This entire system is governed by the Federal Constitution, which stands as the supreme law of the country. Under this constitutional framework, powers are clearly divided between two main levels, which is the federal government at the centre and the various state government. Each level has its own specific responsibilities, and then by clearly separating these powers, the Federal Constitution ensures four critical elements for our nations, which is the first one, it upholds the rule of law. Second, it maintains political stability. Third, it provides balanced governance between the centre and the states. And then finally, it fosters national unity across the country.
Back to me again, we're gonna tell you guys about our objective of this study, which have 3 points. First, to identify the similarities and difference between federal and state government. Secondly, to examine the constitutional relationship between the federal government and state government. Last but not least, to discuss the principle of constitutional supremacy and its role. Our method for this study are by using academic journals, government website, legal reports, and public research. Most of these are searched at Google Scholar. What is Federal Constitution? Federal Constitution is the supreme law of Malaysia. It came into effect on 31st August 1957 when the Federation of Malaya gained their independence. The Constitution is important because it provides the legal framework for the country. It explains the powers and responsibility of the federal government, state government, and citizens. It also established the three branches of government, which are the executive, legislature, and judiciary. Under Article 4.1, the Constitution is the highest law in Malaysia. This means that if any law conflicts with the Constitution, the law is considered invalid. The Constitution also protects the rights of citizens, prevents the abuse of power, and helps maintain the democracy, political stability, and national unity. Now, I will explain the main function of the Federal Constitution. First, it established the structure of the government by creating the executive, legislature, and judiciary. It clearly defines their power and their responsibilities. Second, it divides powers between the federal government and the state government through the federal list, state list, and concurrent list. This helps avoid conflicts and ensure efficient administration. Third, it protects the fundamental rights and freedom of Malaysian citizens, such as the right to life and freedom of religion. Fourth, it defines the roles of important national institutions, including the Yang di-Pertuan Agong, Parliament, the Judiciary, and the Election Commission. Finally, it promotes national unity and political stability by providing a fair legal framework for Malaysia's diverse society. Next, I will explain the state constitution in Malaysia. Besides the federal constitution, each of Malaysia's 13 states has its own state constitution. The state constitution is the highest law within each state and provides the legal framework for state governance. Its main function is to establish the structure of the state government. It defines the roles and powers of the Sultan or Yang di-Pertuan Negeri, the Menteri Besar or Chief Minister, the State Executive Council, EXCO, and the State Legislative Assembly, DUN. The state constitution also gives state governments the authority to manage matters under the state list, such as land administration, forestry, agriculture, Islamic affairs, and Malay customs. Although each state has its own constitution, all state constitutions must follow the federal constitution, which remains the supreme law of Malaysia. Next, I will explain the division of powers between the federal and state governments. Malaysia practices a federal system where powers are divided between the federal government and the state governments under the 9th schedule of the federal constitution. There are three categories of legislative powers. First is the federal list. It includes defense, foreign affairs, finance, education, transportation, communication, and internal security. Only Parliament has the authorities to make laws on these matters because they involve national interests. Second is the state list. It includes land administration, forestry, agriculture, Islamic affairs, Malay custom, and local government. The State Legislative Assembly has the authority to make laws on this matter because they are related to local needs and state administration. Third is the concurrent list. It includes public health, housing, environmental protection, social affairs, and the town planning. Both the federal government and the state government share the responsibility for making laws and managing these areas through cooperation. State autonomy in Malaysia. State autonomy refers to the authority of state governments to manage matters within their own state without unnecessary interference from the federal government. This allows each state to make decisions based on its own needs and priorities. State government have the authority to manage areas such as land administration, forestry, agriculture, Islamic affairs, Malay custom, and local government. This responsibility help them provide better service to the local community. In Malaysia, Sabah and Sarawak have greater autonomy compared to the other states. Under the Malaysia Agreement 1963, MA63, they have special power over matters such as immigration, native custom, religion, and certain administrative affairs. State autonomy is important because it improves administrative efficiency, protect local culture and traditions, and allow state governments to respond more effectively to regional issues. At the same time, all state powers must remain consistent with the federal constitution, which is the supreme law of Malaysia.
Next, let's take a look at the key constitutional provisions. We have listed 4 essential articles that form the foundation of our legal system. So the first one is Article 4 Clause 1. It establishes that the federal constitution is the supreme law of the land, meaning that any law inconsistent with it is void. And second is Article 75. It resolves conflicts between laws. So it states that if a state law clashes with a federal law, the federal law prevails. Third is the Article 121. It gives power to our high courts, allowing them to review laws and check if they are valid. And lastly is Article 128. It gives exclusive jurisdiction to the federal court to decide on constitutional disputes between states and the federal government. Moving on to constitutional supremacy. The federal constitution stands as the highest law in Malaysia. So the judiciary acts as the gatekeeper here, ensuring that both federal and state government comply with it. And finally, why is it important? First, it ensures all governments act within their constitutional limits. Second, it protects citizens' rights and the rule of law. Third, it prevents conflicts between the federal and the state levels. And lastly, it maintains political stability and legal certainty across the country. Let's take a look at the similarities between federal and state governments. The first one, they both operate under written constitutions. The federal government follows the federal constitution, while each state has its own state constitution to define its powers. Second, both practice parliamentary democracy based on the British Westminster system. At the federal state, the cabinet is responsible to parliament, and at the state level, the executive council is responsible to the state legislative assembly. Third, they both serve public welfare, whether it is federal ministries managing healthcare or state departments managing local land. Their ultimate goal is basically to serve the citizens. Fourth, both are subject to judicial review. This means that any law or action from either level can be challenged and struck down by the courts if it is unconstitutional. And finally, both levels governs according to the rule of law. This is to ensure that no government operates without proper rule or outside the legal framework. Moving on to the differences between the federal and state governments. Let's take a look at the federal aspect first. So the first one, the federal government handles big national matters such as defense, finance, and education. Second, the reach is nationwide, meaning that national laws passed by parliament apply to the whole country. And last, for leadership, the government is led by the Prime Minister and the Cabinet under the Yang di-Pertuan Agong. Now, let's have a look at the state aspects. First one is state governments take care of local matters, mostly dealing with local resources like land, forestry, and agriculture. Next, their reach is local, meaning that state law only apply within that specific state's borders. And lastly, their leadership is headed by a Menteri Besar or Chief Minister working with the state's ruler or governor. That's it. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dania Batrisha and I'm going to present task 2 group 2. The title of our assignment is The Role of Tort Law in Malaysia Construction Project, Negligence, Trespasser and Nuisance. So the intro would be, the law of tort in Malaysia is a part of civil law that allows individuals to claim compensation when they suffer harm caused by others. It is based on English law but has developed through Malaysian legislation and court decision to ensure fairness and accountability. It mainly covers these areas, which is negligence, nuisance, and trespass. So negligence occurs when a person fails to take reasonable care, and nuisance involves unreasonable interference with another's use of land, and trespass refers to unauthorized entry or interference with property. So tort law is important in Malaysia as it helps courts to determine liability and award compensation, ensuring justice and protection of individuals' rights. For this task is to explain the law of tort, nuisance, trespasses, negligence, doctrines related to the Malaysian construction industry. And second is to discuss the application of the nuisance, trespasses, and negligence doctrines in construction settings using examples and case law. So, and last but not least, to identify the legal consequences and recommend measures to reduce legal risk in construction projects.
First of all, I will explain about the law of tort. The law of tort is a part of civil law that protects people when they suffer from injury, property damage, and also financial loss from another person's wrongful act. The main purpose is to compensate the victim and hold the wrongdoer legally. In this presentation, we will focus on three main parts, which is negligence, trespass, and nuisance. First, I will talk about law of tort. Law of tort is part of civil law that supposed to protect individuals from suffer harm, property damage, or financial loss from another person's wrongful act. Its main purpose is to compensate the victim and hold the wrongdoer legally responsible. Unlike criminal law that punish the offender, tort law focuses on resolving the dispute between the private parties and restoring the victim to the position that they were in before the harm was occurred. The first type of tort is negligence. Negligence occurs when a person fails to take a reasonable care on their own being, causing injury, property damage to another person. To establish negligence, four elements must be proven. First, the defendant owns a duty of care to the plaintiff. And second, the defendant breached the duty by failing to act reasonable. Third, the breach direct caused the damage, and finally, the plaintiff must have suffered actual loss or injury. The second is trespass. Trespass is unlawful interference with another person's land, property, or person without their permission. It can be divided three types: the land, trespass to goods, and trespass to the person. Unlike negligence, trespass does not always require proof of damage because the wrongful interference itself is to establish liability. The third Third is nuisance. Nuisance occur when a person's activity interferes with another person's use or enjoyment of their land. Common example include excessive noise, dust, smoke, artificial odor, or pollution. Unlike trespass or negligence, nuisance does not involve in injuring another person's property. Instead, it focuses on unreasonable interference that affect the neighboring landowner. Now I will explain about the case analysis about negligence. The case that I just is the Highland Tower collapse. The plaintiff were the survivor of the collapse and also one of the families that who suffered from loss, injuries, and also damaged property. The defendants include the developer, the architect, engineer, and the local authorities and also other parties. The main legal issues was whether the defendant had breached their duty of care by failing to ensure that the safety of the building and their surroundings were safe. After hearing evidence, the court found out that the building had poor drainage design. It also lack of maintenance. It also uncontrolled hillside maintenance that developed the water to accumulate, leading to a landslide that caused weakening the foundation of the building. The court concluded that several of the defendants had failed to take a reasonable care and also were therefore negligent. As a result, the defendants held liable and then the damages were awarded to the victim of the survivor family. In this case, it remains of one of the Malaysia leading negligence cases and has influenced strict safety standards for hillside development in building
For
construction.
the case law analysis, I took from Desa Samudra Sdn Bhd v Bandar Teknik Sdn Bhd and ORS 2012. So the federal court was called upon to determine the point in time at precedent relating to a scheme of arrangement under the Section 176 of the Companies Act 1965, which triggered the termination of a standard form building contract by the Persatuan Arkitek Malaysia PAM contract. So in this case, the plaintiff, who was the employer of the construction project under PAM, and the defendants were the subcontractors appointed by the main contractors to perform under the project, and the plaintiff had terminated the main construction contract, and the defendants subsequently entered the construction site without the plaintiff's consent to retrieve their machinery and equipment by causing damage to the construction site. So the plaintiff initiated legal action against the subcontractors for civil trespass and conversion. So the primary legal issue before the federal court was whether the subcontractors maintained an implied license or lawful justification to enter the construction site post-termination to the purpose of reclaiming their property.
This analysis is the third one, nuisance. To prove a private nuisance, the disruption must be substantial and unreasonable. In this case, uh, at Cameron Highland at Batam Valley, the envy let thick mud and food accumulate inside the reservoir for years without cleaning it up. When heavy rain hit, they suddenly opened the gate and sending a violent wall of mud downstream that completely destroyed the plaintiff's resort and farm. The court ruled that putting this level of physical destruction it can easily cross-line into unreasonable nuisance. JNB tried to argue to defend themselves by arguing necessity, claiming that they had to release the water to prevent the dam from bursting. However, the court completely rejected this. The judge pointed out that the emergency was created because the NB neglected the dam capacity for the lake was too shallow to handle the rain. Under the third law, you cannot use necessity as an excuse for a case that replaces the fact. Ultimately, DNB was held fully liable and ordered to pay 4.724 million for the damage toward the victim. It is proving that the leadership would never give a developer a lesson to be negligent. This slide explains about the legal consequences of the disregard, negligence, trespass, and nuisance. First, for liability, negligence arises when a person fails to take reasonable care, causing a foreseeable harm to others. Then, trespass occurs when someone enters another person's land without their permission. For nuisance, liability arises when a person's action interferes with another person's use and enjoyment of their own property. Next, for defense, a defendant can avoid liability if they have a valid legal defense. In negligence, the defendant in the Highland Tower case argued the heavy rainfall caused the collapse, but the court found out that they have caused damage and slip management that is the main cause. In trespass, common defense include owner consent. In trespass, the defense include the common consent, legal authority, or their necessity. For instance, the defendant may argue that the damage was caused by natural event or third parties, but this defense will fail if they did not take a reasonable step to prevent the harm. Finally, for the remedies, the main remedy in negligence is the damage or financial compensation as seen in the Highland Tower case. In trespass, the court may award damage or grant an injunction to prevent future trespass. And nuisance, the court may also award the damage and issue an injunction to stop the activities causing the nuisance. Overall, tort law ensures that the victim receives the compensation while those that responsible are held
So
to
recommendation
account.
for risk mitigation and legal compliance. So prevention of tort claims in construction is to follow legal requirements, industry standards, proper planning, risk assessments, inspection and regular maintenance of structures, drainage and slopes. So prevent negligence by exercising reasonable care, complying with safety regulations, using qualified personnel and carrying out regular maintenance. So reduce nuisance by controlling noise, dust, pollution and water runoff affecting surrounding areas. Avoid trespass by respecting property boundaries and obtaining proper approvals before entering private land. So this strengthens enforcement through government inspection and strict compliance with regulation to ensure. And last but not least, the conclusion is the tort law is an important part of the legal framework in the Malaysian construction industry, governing conduct and determining liability. So key doctrines of negligence, nuisance and trespass provide protection to workers, property owners, neighboring landowners, and the public. So negligence arises from failure to exercise reasonable care, resulting in injury or property damage, and trespass protect property right by preventing unauthorized entry or encroachment onto land. Nuisance protects neighbors from unreasonable disturbances such as noise, dust, and vibration. So case law shows how these principles apply in practice and clarifies the responsibility of contractors, consultants, and other stakeholders. And failure to comply with these duties may result in legal liability and court-ordered damages or remedies. Therefore, construction companies should implement strong risk management, comply with laws, ensure safety, and minimize distraction to reduce legal liability. And that's all from us. Thank you very much.